My camping adventure with friends. There's something magical about the idea of camping. It's the thought of escaping the hustle and bustle of everyday life, leaving behind the noise of the city, and immersing yourself in the quiet and beauty of nature. This year, I decided to make that dream a reality and go camping with a group of my closest friends. What started as a casual idea turned into an unforgettable adventure. This is the story of how my friends and I spent a weekend in the wilderness, surrounded by trees, laughter, and plenty of unforgettable memories. It all started one evening when my friend Sarah suggested we go camping. We had been talking about outdoor adventures for months, but we had never actually gone through with it. As soon as the idea was mentioned, it sparked a wave of excitement among the group. We all needed a break from our daily routines. Camping was the perfect opportunity to unplug, get outside, and spend quality time together. The planning process was an adventure in itself. Our group was made up of 6 people, and each of us had our own ideas about what camping should look like. Some of us were experienced campers while others had never even set up a tent before. We started by discussing where we wanted to go. After a lot of back and forth, we settled on a beautiful national park about 3 hours away from our city. The park offered everything we wanted: lush forests, crystal clear lakes, and scenic hiking trails. It was remote enough to feel like an escape, but close enough for a weekend trip. Once the location was decided, we began organizing the trip. We divided the responsibilities. Sarah and Jake were in charge of food, Emma and I would take care of the camping gear, and Mark and Alex volunteered to handle transportation. We made a list of everything we'd need: tents, sleeping bags, a portable stove, food, drinks, and of course, some games and music for the nights around the campfire. It was a collaborative effort, with each of us contributing our thoughts and ideas to ensure the weekend would be perfect. The day of the trip finally arrived, and we all met up early in the morning. Everyone was in high spirits, eager to begin the adventure. We packed our gear into 2 cars and hit the road, excited for what lay ahead. The drive was filled with music, laughter, and the occasional snack break. As we made our way out of the city and into the countryside, the landscape began to change. The towering buildings and crowded streets faded into rolling hills, vast fields, and eventually, the dense woods that signaled we were getting close to our destination. During the drive, we played games to pass the time. I Spy was a favorite, and there was a lot of joking around about who was the best at spotting strange animals or objects. As we drove deeper into the wilderness, the excitement in the car grew. Sarah and Jake began talking about the meals they had planned, which included everything from grilled cheese sandwiches to s'mores. Emma and I went over the gear we had packed, making sure we hadn't forgotten anything important. And Mark and Alex discussed the best hiking trails to tackle once we arrived. After a couple of hours, we finally arrived at the park. We stopped at the visitor center to get a map and check in with the rangers. The air was fresh and cool, and the scent of pine trees filled our lungs. It felt like we were entering a completely different world. The noise of the city was gone, replaced by the peaceful sounds of nature. Birds chirped in the distance, and the wind rustled the leaves in the trees. It was the perfect start to what promised to be an unforgettable weekend. The next step was to find a good spot to set up our campsite. We drove around the park for a little while, looking for a clearing near a lake where we could pitch our tents. Eventually, we found the perfect spot: a secluded area surrounded by trees, with a small trail leading down to the water's edge. It was peaceful and private, just the way we wanted it. We unloaded the cars and began setting up our camp. The tents went up quickly, thanks to the fact that most of us had done this before. Still, there were a few moments of confusion when we couldn't figure out how to put up one of the tents, which led to a lot of laughter and a little bit of frustration. After some trial and error, we finally managed to get everything in place. We laid out our sleeping bags, set up the camp stove, and arranged our cooler full of food. By the time we finished, the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the entire campsite. Once everything was set up, we took a moment to appreciate our surroundings. The lake was still and mirror-like, reflecting the tall trees and the golden light of the setting sun. We gathered around the campfire pit, and Jake got to work lighting the fire. It took a few tries, but eventually, the fire crackled to life, sending sparks into the cool evening air. We sat around the fire, roasting marshmallows, telling stories, and just enjoying the simplicity of the moment. As night fell, the temperature dropped, but we didn't mind. We were all bundled up in our jackets, cozy around the fire. The sound of the crackling wood was soothing, and the conversation flowed easily. We talked about everything: our favorite childhood memories, our future plans, and all the things that had been weighing on our minds lately. The conversation was deep at times, but also full of jokes and laughter. It felt good to be away from our phones and the distractions of everyday life, just living in the moment with good friends. After a while, we decided it was time to get some rest. The campfire had burned down to a small glow, and the stars above were shining brightly. We made our way to our tents, crawled into our sleeping bags, and tried to settle in for the night. The sounds of the forest crickets chirping, the occasional owl hoot were comforting, and I quickly drifted off to sleep. However, sleep wasn't as easy for everyone. Sarah and Emma, who were in the tent next to mine, couldn't stop giggling. Apparently, they had forgotten to pack their earplugs, and the forest sounds were keeping them awake. I tried to block out their laughter and get some rest, but it was hard to ignore the excitement in the air. Despite the minor distractions, I eventually fell into a deep sleep, lulled by the peacefulness of the woods. The next morning, I woke up early to the sound of birds chirping outside my tent. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a soft glow on everything around us. I stretched, crawled out of my sleeping bag, and unzipped the tent. The cool morning air felt refreshing on my face as I took in the beauty of the campsite. The lake was calm, and the trees were bathed in the soft light of dawn. The others began to stir as well. One by one, they emerged from their tents, rubbing their eyes and yawning. Sarah and Emma, who had stayed up late talking, were the last to wake up, still looking a little sleepy. We gathered around the campfire, where Jake had already started brewing some coffee. It was the perfect way to start the day, sipping hot coffee, enjoying the cool air, and talking about what we wanted to do next. After breakfast, we decided to go on a hike. The park had several trails, and we chose one that led to a scenic viewpoint overlooking the entire valley. The hike wasn't too difficult, but it was still a good workout. We joked and laughed as we made our way along the trail, pausing every now and then to take in the views or snap pictures of the wildlife. The trees seemed to stretch endlessly, and the path was quiet, with only the sound of our footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. When we finally reached a viewpoint, we were all out of breath, but the view made it worth it. The valley stretched out before us, a patchwork of green forests, meadows, and distant mountains. We sat down on a large rock, taking in the breathtaking scene. It was a moment of quiet reflection, and we all felt a sense of gratitude for the experience. We had made it together, through the trail and into this beautiful place, and we knew it was a memory we'd hold on to forever. That evening, we gathered around the campfire once again, this time to share our favorite moments of the trip. It felt like the perfect way to end the day. We talked about our favorite parts of the hike, the funniest moments from the night before, and the things we had learned about each other during the weekend. It was a simple conversation, but it felt meaningful, like we had shared something special. As the fire burned down and the night grew colder, we all started to feel a little sad. The weekend had flown by faster than we had expected, and it was almost time to pack up and head back to the city. But we didn't let the sadness linger. Instead, we decided to make the most of the last few hours we had in the woods. We roasted marshmallows, told stories, and even tried to identify constellations in the clear night sky. Eventually, we all retreated to our tents for one last night under the stars. The air was crisp, and the forest was quieter than ever. I lay there, listening to the wind in the trees, feeling at peace with everything. I knew that this trip, this simple weekend in the wilderness, would stay with me for a long time. It wasn't just about the hiking, the campfires, or the good food. It was about the connection we shared and the way we had come together to experience something truly special. The next morning, we packed up our campsite and began the drive home. The mood in the car was a mix of contentment and nostalgia. We were all a little sad to leave, but we knew we'd be back. There was something about this trip that had brought us closer together, and we were already talking about the next camping adventure. As the city skyline appeared in the distance, I felt grateful for the experience. It had been a weekend of friendship, laughter, and discovery. We had come to the wilderness to escape, and in doing so, we had found something even more valuable, a deeper connection to nature and to each other.